You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Gerasimos Stylianessis. All right, everybody, welcome back to Here for the Truth, episode 40, bro. 40 episodes. There's a milestone.
Amazing. Yeah. 6 months. It's been pretty amazing.
Has been. Thank you so much for your support so far on this journey. It's been incredible sharing this knowledge and connecting with you all. And today is absolutely no different. Really looking forward to this one with Dr. Cassie Huckabee. Dr. Cassie Huckabee is a naturopathic physician and founder of Grit Natural Medicine. Through her own journey of healing the impossible, she discovered unshakable truths that she now utilizes through her medicine to help others realize their true potential and optimal health, and ultimately shows them how to obtain freedom from the medical system. Dr. Huckabee's passion is to provide medicine that heals and education that demystifies healing. Her medicine weaves together the modern world of quantum medicine with the unchangeable truths held in ancient wisdom. She helps her patients understand the language of their body through deep listening and understanding of how all things, including the mind, neurology, and soul, impact the physical body. She focuses on all that encompasses the human being and believes that with true understanding, truth, and grit, you can do what most say is impossible. Above all, she believes, lives, and teaches that your life is your medicine. I love everything about what I just read. Cassie, welcome to Here for the Truth.
It's so good to be here with you both.
Yeah, no, it's pretty awesome to have you here for sure. And I know someone we had on the podcast earlier, Tommy John, I think he's your biggest fan, you know?
I'm a huge fan of him. I think we just speak the same language. When you find your like-minded people and they get it, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not so strange.
I'm right there with you.
I love it.
Yeah,
he's great.
Cassie, just to start, can you share with us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and also the impossible healing journey that you overcome to stand and speak the way you do now?
Absolutely. So I started out, I'm from West Texas, so I started out just the conventional route. I was an overachiever, did pre-med, all of the stuff that I thought was so very important. And then went all the way through undergrad, did everything, and then was going to go into allopathic medical school. And towards the end of that, my health wasn't optimal, obviously. And then I had a series of events, including a series of vaccinations. And then my health just plummeted to the point where I could no longer ignore it. So then I went to the model that I trusted the most. And they basically said, we can't do anything for you. But we have some experimental drugs that you could try, but like the whole little side effect list was not something I wanted to sign up for. So at that point, my heart, soul, mind was cracked open to be available for something different. And because of that availability, the world of natural medicine came in, and I just dived in head first and demanded a little bit that it prove itself to me. And through that, I proved myself to me. And it led me to the world of the mind, the spirit, the soul, and how all of that comes together to create life as a human, and the magic and the power and the potential that we have as human beings. And it totally changed my view of medicine, changed my definition of medicine, and then has influenced my life. And that's what I created within my practice, to show everybody that the medicine really is inside them, and there's nothing external to you that you need, and having practical, doable, actionable steps to actually get you there, not just talk about it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the journey in terms of like what were some of the symptoms that were presenting?
Absolutely.
And like, were there people along the way that kind of guided you to these deeper truths?
Yeah. So initially I was diagnosed with 5 different things. I don't say the diagnoses. I don't believe in those words. I don't play by that game at all. So I'm not going to use their language. But I had a lot of neurological decline. That was actually what got my attention, because my skin changed. My vision started changing. Lots of different little stuff started changing. And then the neurological symptoms were just big enough to where I could no longer ignore those. because my brain was my number one thing, and then physically too, not able to be as physically active as I had been before, in coordination and a lot of stuff like that was impacted greatly. And so that was actually what forced my hand. I think a lot of people have to get to some sort of rock bottom, unfortunately, to be available to greater truths, unless you just have a beautiful start in life, or a community around you that has access to this wisdom. And so then it really was, breadcrumbs. The most transformational moment was a clinic there in Lubbock, Texas, actually. And it was an integrative clinic, and that's where I first came across natural medicine, naturopathic medicine. But it was a MD who ran the clinic, and he just chose to do things a different way. And so I actually just shadowed there. I didn't seek out care because I didn't value it just yet at that time. But I shadowed just out of pure curiosity, and it was transformational and opened my eyes to so many different things. And then he put me in contact with a naturopathic doctor who would come and take all of the most severe cases at that clinic. And so I got to sit behind the scenes with both of these men and was just completely blown away. So they didn't actually do any therapies or treatments on me, but they allowed me to come into their practice and watch what they did. And so I give them so much credit to being the best at what they did. They really pushed, back on so many things that now I'm in that same spot of like, I had no idea what those men were doing, and the magnitude of the medicine they were bringing to people, and how much you have to fight for it, and really stand for what you believe in when you come into this world. And so those two were probably the most influential with regards to doctors in the natural world, because I had no exposure. I came from, like I said, a small town in West Texas, and like these words weren't even in my vocabulary. Like it was nothing I would even Google. I had no idea. Even going into medical school, I was the one that like showed up with a plastic water bottle because I had no concept of anything. And so even like homeopathy and herbs, and I'm like, what is this world I'm in? I came in just like completely oblivious. And so my learning curve was quite steep, and everything I did was just out of this just hunger for this knowledge and this wisdom. Because when I came into that clinic, it was like such an eye-opening experience of a world I had no idea even existed, that was so much more beautiful, so much more positive, so much more life-giving. And all it was my capacity to be available for different information. And I was so rigid and so closed-minded and so just like performance and everything is how it is, and trusted the system. I was the poster child for education and government, and I was exactly what they wanted me to be in the beginning. And then just to be so close to something so true and so pure, I was just blown away that it was right there the whole time. And all it took was me to loosen my, grip and my rigidity on what I thought I knew, and what was important, and what was prestigious, and what was valuable. And so it really was just this like breadcrumb trail of like, I want more, I need more. And then when I did all the doing, because in med school, I basically learned something and I applied it. I was just a walking experiment. So I learned it, I applied it, I changed it, I experimented, I did everything. And just for that whole 4 years in med school, I was just a walking experiment on myself. And so I didn't really have anyone, exactly showing me the way, but they were giving me breadcrumbs, and I was piecing it together and using it on myself, and tasting the herbs and experimenting with all these crazy things and finding what was true. And then those breadcrumbs led to this world of there's more than the physical doing of stuff. There's so much more than just the herbs and the diet and the nutrition and the supplements and the light and the movement and the stuff. And so then that's ultimately what completely radically changed my life, was opening up to that world, that there's so much more to us than we've ever been told. And so even like going and looking at research and being like, okay, if they control for this, I want to know more about that. If they control for this, I want to know how to use what they're controlling for.
Yep.
Because they even value it so much so that they control for it. So I want to play in the field of all of this stuff that annoys researchers. I want to have access to how do we use these things to benefit us. And so that's ultimately where I got, and what I'm, swimming in that world now. We blend it all. We do the doing, but you have to know why and how you're doing those things. So it really has an impact at the cellular level and can really give you the benefit that you intellectually think that it should have. And so, long answer to that, but
oh no,
it really was just breadcrumbs led me everywhere, I think, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it. Just seeking.
Sounds like the absolute classic hero's journey to me. There's no doubt about that. So what is the more? What is the why? You use this term quantum medicine. Can you dive us a bit deeper into what that means?
So I like to keep it really simple. I fell in love with the complexity of it, these really tiny particles and how they reacted and respond, and how they could be influenced with intention and thought and all of these different things. But ultimately it came to the fact that we're not just these physical bodies, that there's so much more to us, and our bodies are these massively powerful, unbelievable quantum machines, the most advanced technology on the planet. And we're interfacing with this world that we can't really see. So we admit that there's a whole spectrum that we're not able to see with our eyes. So we admit that, like, there's a visible spectrum of light, and there's things we can't see here, but we're just going to ignore those things and just play with what we can see, what we can taste, what we can touch. But then when I came to understand the physical body and understand the mind and understand neurology, I realized that we were dancing and interfacing with the metaphysical background. So all of those things you can't see, all of the things you can't really taste or touch or feel, but they're there, right? You can feel it on a different level, maybe, if you're really sensitive. And so this is where I go and use that word quantum. A lot of people view it a lot differently, but I view the individual as the most powerful quantum machine on the planet. I was in love with all the lasers and all the machines and the gadgets and stuff, but then I started realizing that we're still outsourcing our power to something external to us. And so I use those things to realize our capacity. If we can communicate with these devices, if we can communicate with this technology, what does that say about us? Because we didn't have to be taught that. And so then I really stepped away from that world, but kept those foundational truths of, even just the simplicity, not the simplicity, it's massively complex, but just the truths that you can find within the research within that field of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, what happens with intention, and looking into the research about even, what we have access to, but we've never been told these things. And to go into those worlds of intention and go into the world of the mind and go into the world of our neurology and use these things to benefit us, and to know that we are the most powerful quantum machine on the planet. Like, everybody is studying the human body still. And you would think that it was pretty much studied, but there's so much more to even our neurology, and even just our tissues, our cells, the interspaces between the cells, the fluids, the water. Like, there's so much to us that we're not even, our minds can't even grasp that. So we can't even play and dance in that world. We're still so much, like, so not simple, but just, it's kind of petty, the stuff that we value, the things that we think that we need when we're walking around. I always tell my patients, like, it's like the world has convinced us that we're a bunch of go-karts. And so we're out there, like, going and buying all the latest, greatest go-kart parts and doing all these wonderful things in a go-kart. And it's like, when I realized this, I was like, looking in at all these people being like, should we tell them that they're a bunch of Ferraris and not go-karts? And like, even though they have the best go-kart parts, it doesn't matter because they're Ferraris. And so this was how I started seeing the human body when I went and searched, because when I got to the end of, physiology, and you get to the end of the cell, and you get to the end of DNA, and it pulls you into that quantum world, and it connects this whole thing, and you're just blown away. And you go from feeling really, really small to really, really big to just powerful. And like, if we knew this, if we truly believed this, if this was circulating in our veins, what would humanity look like? Because a lot of people will talk about it, but we don't believe it. Because if you believed it, you would use these things. You would play with this stuff. You would be like, I always have, what's your goal? coming to see me on my intake forms. And I love how, like, after I see people, they're like, can I go back and change my goals? And I'm like, fuck yes, let's do it. Because you come in saying, I want to heal, you know, Hashimoto's, I want to heal MS, I want to heal this. And then when we go and speak truth into the person in front of me, then they're like, I want so much more than that. I want to levitate. I want a remote view. I want to like push what it is to be a human, push what it is to age chronologically in this physical plane. And I'm like, yes, 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 yes. Like if we really believed it, our goals would look different. Our actions would look different. Our questions would look different. We're still on such a level of limitation that even questions that people pose is like, I mean, we'll answer that question, but there's so much more.
Yeah.
Like, and so this is, to me, what that quantum word means is just nothing that's out of reach, but it's all here if you just realize you had it.
Yeah. You know, hearing you talk, it kind of just brings me back to this idea that like to keep holding that childlike wonder about the vastness and amazingness of the world around us that unfortunately gets beaten and conditioned out of us in conventional schooling. Because it's like there's this arrogance, especially when you think about allopathy, of like things that have been developed over a few hundred years, that they have all the answers to these questions. Nothing else exists out here, and I say so because I'm the new priest, and you shall listen, or else you shall repent. It's just ridiculous to me, and like that, like to have the humility to realize, like, man, I may know things, but I just don't know. There is so much. Who are we? Where do we come from? What is the history of this planet? Like, it's just fascinating to me. So to like, I just love hearing practitioners and humans have that energy about them, because it's just I mean, that talk about like aging, like when you live like that, and when you every cell of your being with excitement, that's what keeps you alive and keeps you flowing. So I don't know, I just dig it.
Well, when you think about the physical body too, because that's where I came to, is like, this stuff is not just, you know, people are like, oh, you're sparkly, whatever, you're just like live in a fantasy world. And I'm like, I think my fantasy world is more real than your sad, depressing, like bland world you live in. We're all playing fantasy. Like nobody really is responding to reality as it is. And so exactly what you're touching on, like what we are doing is we're using our memory to shape and color how we're perceiving our present time. And it's not true. And we talk about all the time, like our minds have been captured by society, by the government, by programming, by education. And then we're a society of people that continue to use the tool that we admit was captured. And so then it's still this whole thing, like, what if we actually responded to reality as it is? And you have to have that wonder. You have to have that childlike curiosity, because it's true. Because if you come in with a preconceived notion of what you know, everything that you know is of the past, everything that you know is intellect, everything, and you're saying this thing was captured. So you think you're accurately experiencing the world as it is? Are you accurately experiencing your body as it is? Is it true? And so many times you just ask a couple questions, and like if it doesn't blow your mind with wonder, you're not asking the right questions. And so you can go anywhere you want in this world. But when I started working with people, I was like, I never wanted to be the one that limited their capacity, because then you look at research, and even not even like quantum research, just regular research. What do? They control for the practitioner and they control for the participant. Why? Because either one of them can influence the outcome of the research study. You can enhance or you can decrease, or that's why they hate placebo too, because the participant can be like, oh my gosh, this is a statin. And you're like, no, it's a sugar pill. And they're like, my cholesterol's lower.
Yeah.
And
that was the next question. That's the next question I want to ask you, was about that. We know, because allopathic are like, well, they admit that it's a real thing, but they're not going to sit here and talk about it to the degree.
No, but I use it. I use it every single day with every single person, because if you can say you value evidence-based medicine, because you value double-blind placebo-controlled studies, and then you're going to sit there in front of your patients and tell them what they can and can't do, and you're going to place a limitation on their physical capacity, and you say you value that, I've got questions about you as a practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're working with somebody and you're not going to say, hey, your belief in the outcome of this thing matters more than anything we do here. And you're not going to be upfront and honest about that. So that you both can meet in the same place saying, this is our goal. We have a unified vision. We have a unified goal. I'm all the way the fuck in. Are you all the way the fuck in? And if you are, watch out. Because you will, it works. Why? We value it in the smallest parts of research to control against it. I sure as hell going to use it in every single encounter I have. Why? Because if I can give you just one more breath of fresh air than you had yesterday, why not? Like, why not? And so that's why I never, like, even with like testimonies and people being like, have you ever worked with somebody with this? I'm like, I don't care. It has nothing to do with the human sitting in front of me. You show me what you can do. I'm going to show you what I can do. And then if we do this dance right together, let's show the world what we can do, because no book has ever studied you. No book has ever studied me, and no book has ever studied us together. And so and now we know, even in the world of, quantum physics, you can affect the particle just by the intention that is happening while you're observing the particle. So let's use this stuff. And so that's where I was just like, it's actually, I think it's malpractice to go and tell a patient what their prognosis is based on somebody else that's not the person sitting in front of them. Why? You control against the same stuff in a research study because you value it, because it is something. And then you're going to tell somebody how long they get to live. You're going to tell somebody how, oh, you can cure this, but you can't cure that. You can heal that, but you sure as hell can't. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I hear you.
So then
we've
got bigger problems. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I totally hear you. Like, I'm a beginning student of studying like Germanic healing knowledge, German new medicine, and just even thinking about like what a diagnosis does to a person's psyche.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
well, when I was doing my healing journey, that was a big eye opener for me, because it was harder for me to remove my mental association to those words than it was for me to change my physical body. And I was like, we got a problem.
Yeah,
we've got a big problem. And I will never give somebody a word, because the other thing too, when you go and look at how we diagnose people, it's a guess. You check enough boxes underneath an umbrella. He has that. One more little box. Do you have you ever experienced? Okay, now we can give you a word, and then you can fit into our little algorithm, because then we'll maybe have some idea of what to do with you.
Yeah.
And so the whole world of the diagnosis is absolutely ridiculous. And even like the simplicity of it, like I always try to tell my patients, like, what's the difference between a stray cat and a pet cat? You name and claim one of them, and you keep feeding it. So if you don't want to keep it, I definitely wouldn't name it and like open your house to it and let it come live in your living room and talk to it every day and tell people about it. And everything that the medical model is doing is so like on purpose in the direction away from what actually helps human beings heal. And we'd be better off without it, in my opinion.
Well, we make the world in our image. So if our image is going to be, I guess, you know what I mean, imbued with these diagnoses and these limitations, and we form this internal worldview of whatever it might be. I'm sick. I'm lacking. I'm limited. Then that's obviously what we're going to continue to create. I want to ask you this: do you think people are scared of their potential?
Absolutely, because it's a massive responsibility. Because you have to, even with what I did, I had to quit. I realized psychologically where there were pieces of me owning those words that were excuses for me on why I couldn't do things. And then when I caught that, I was like, yeah, that's not going to fly with me. And so it's a massive thing, because it's something that I come head to head with people all the time, because even in my practice, I want truth above comfort. I want truth above all things. And sometimes the truth I have to deliver to people is, you are your biggest problem, and you're the reason that you're not healing. And sometimes that sucks to hear, because it breaks your heart, because you're like, but I feel bad and all of these things. But the truth is if you really wanted to do something, you would do it. And if you really want excuses for why you can't, you will find every excuse in the world. And the best excuse we've ever had is a diagnosis. Why? Because all of modern medicine says I can't. So why even try? Right? And so this is a huge piece that a lot of people don't even think about, because to be that self-reliant, which we are, we have that built in. You don't need a doctor to heal the body. You don't. It knows what to do. It doesn't care about our books, our research. It's just like, I already do that, guys. That's how you know, because you're studying me. And so this whole thing is, most of us, you know, even though it's a couple of, you know, psychological steps away, so it's not always a one-to-one of like, no, I'm choosing this, but to some degree you are. And so to really step into your power, you have to step into your power and say, I'm my biggest obstacle, but I'm also the most powerful thing on the planet. And therefore, everything I'm choosing, I am choosing to some degree. And so even when I took ownership of, because I was outsourcing a lot to that vaccine, a lot, and I had grounds to stand on. But then I had to go to the truth of the truth of the truth, which was, okay, did every woman that got that same group have the same results as me? No, some died. That's true. Some were totally fine. So is it true that this thing did all of this to me and I couldn't know? No. And so then my questions were, why did those women, why were they okay? Why didn't they get paralysis of any kind? Why didn't they get, oh, they ate differently? They thought differently. They were happy. They were less stressed. They were well hydrated, well moved. Okay, that's interesting. But then if I wanted to still say, oh, the vaccine did this to me, nobody would come and say, you're right. And people would never come face to face to me and be like, why don't you just take ownership and level the fuck up and try? And so a lot of times people don't want to do that because they don't want to fail. It seems like it would break their heart more if they really knew that they couldn't.
Yeah.
But most of the time when you try, you prove yourself to be the most powerful thing on the planet because you are. And so a lot of people don't ever want to try because they don't want the heartbreak of being like, I was wrong. They'd rather hope about it because it feels better to hope than to be certain that it wouldn't work. But when I went into it, because that's what I did with natural medicine, I was like, you are going to prove yourself to me. I gave up everything for you. Okay. So you're going to prove yourself to me. And so I went in with this like fierceness, but then through that, because I almost, you know, I was a little aggressive with it, but it ended up me proving myself to me. And that's the most powerful thing. So exactly what you're touching on, like it's an uncomfortable truth, but to be truly sovereign, self-realized, independent, free people, you have to be able to endure massive levels of discomfort, uncertainty, and responsibility. And the way the structures are, you know, putting everything into place, they give you ways to be really comfortable in your dysfunction. And so we don't want to be uncomfortable. So most of us don't change, and any excuse we can find, even like the better the excuse, even better to not change, because we actually don't want to change. And so if we could just admit these things, it would even still move us forward, you know, as a nation, I think, as humanity, to at least admit like, okay, I don't really want to heal. That's why I'm not trying. Not I can't, right? Because if one person can do it, if one cell in a cell culture anywhere could do it, you can do it. And if not, somebody had to be the first one, right? Somebody had to go somewhere and be like, hey, nobody in the world has ever done this. I'm going to try. And like, we need a bunch of people just like leading that front of like, I don't need a book to tell me it's possible. I don't need to go get a testimony that somebody else could do it somewhere else and know exactly how many steps and what to do. And no, I want to be a self-realized, self-actualized individual. And I want to show the world what's possible. I want them to come study me to rewrite textbooks. And if we had this level of just power and grit and like determination to truly be free, we would get what we wanted, no questions asked.
Yeah, I hear you there.
There's nothing more empowering than figuring something out on your own.
Yeah.
You know, because that's when you actually build the muscle, and that's when you're able to build it further and you realize, holy shit, where else can I go with this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and it gives you that unshakable confidence, because what a lot of people are doing in the world today is they're looking for people who are confident in something. Yeah. And then they're trying to like carbon copy that because they want to feel that certainty. in a world that's extremely uncertain. And unfortunately, that's not how it goes, because people will come to me all the time, like, give me all your books that you read and how you learned how to, and I'm like, have you healed yourself of anything? Try that.
Yeah.
That's the best school you could ever go to, because then what? I can sit in front of, you know, a man that's, you know, had 50 years experience in allopathic medicine, oncology, and I can go head to head with him. Why? I've done it. I don't have to have another research study come out. I'm not waiting on the latest and greatest drug. I've done it. So when somebody has done something, go try to take that experience away from them. Go try to take their certainty away. You can't touch it, because they're like, I did it.
Yeah.
I literally did it. And then when you're working with like patients and you do it again and again, and then somebody else does it and somebody else does it, it's like, come at me with anything. And it's not this like, you know, fabricated, counterfeit confidence. It's this, no, it was a lot of fucking work. And we have to do a lot of really hard stuff and admit some really gnarly truths. But why am I so sure about because I did it. I'm not just asking them to do something I didn't do. I never give something I've never done. I haven't asked somebody to take an herb, or I know what they taste like. I know what it feels like when you're detoxing. I know what it feels like to do all the light, the move. I've done it. And so if we had a bunch of people leading the way on this front of like, why are you so sure? Well, because we're living it, we're breathing it, we're eating it. Like, you cannot, there's no belief system or ideology that could shake this out of me, because I'm literally here experiencing it. And so that's like the most powerful thing. Like, you know, talking about swimming and actually being able to swim are two totally different things, but we've got a world that can fucking talk about swimming and be very convincing. And we need more people out there swimming, being like, oh my gosh, I'm like, this is hard. And like, you breathe in this wet stuff and it's not fun, but you get stronger and stronger and stronger, then you can do some really rad stuff. And like, that's what I'm more interested now of, not like, don't tell me what book you read. Don't tell me like the latest thing that you learned. What have you done? I want to know what you've done. What can this thing do? And how much quicker can it go? And what could we do on the other end? Like the other thing that blows my mind sometimes is after people accomplish the reversal of a diagnosis, they stop there. And I'm like, why? Why don't we go further? Why don't we try something? Like, somebody's levitated. What if we all could? Like, what if that was our new like training? Like, let's fucking levitate.
I just levitated before this interview, just so you know.
Okay. Then I'm gonna come join you and like hang out. Like, how? Why is it not working?
It's the Topanga vortex, okay?
Oh, okay.
What's going on there?
I don't have a vortex here, or maybe I do.
You just have to believe that you do.
Yeah, I make the vortex. Screw you, Sedona.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
I love it.
Yeah.
The system is designed to keep people trapped in the victim archetype, because that's where they want to stay. And what we need to begin to do is stop assuming that someone else knows better than us for us.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone's fucking stuck doing, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about breaking patterns too, about even just how you grew up, is so many people have gotten, or they've seen the people in their life get love and attention from when they're not well, or they have some kind of diagnosis. And so that becomes the motivating principle. It's like, well, the only way I can get love and attention is if I'm not well. And then you have media everywhere that celebrates people who are victims. So it's just a cycle. You have to have grit to literally separate yourself from it, unplug from that matrix, and do the real work. Yeah,
and it's heartbreaking. And so like what you just touched on there, like that's a heartbreaking reality, to be like, you wake up in that and you're like, oh my gosh. Like, and that's what I always try to work with people. I'm like, what do you really care about? Because that's dictating your choices. And we all think that we care about this right here. And so this is where we try to spend all of our attention and our time. And I'm like, actually, it's like 3 levels deep. And so just like what you're touching on, for a lot of people, there's a human need is to be connected, to be loved, and be taken care of by a community. And to know that that's not wrong, but you don't have to be weak to be taken care of and loved and part of a community. And so to be able to go there and give yourself that grace of like, I see why that was valuable to you, but you no longer have to do it this way. You no longer have to have this middleman to have this thing that you want the most, which is that unconditional love, that connection, that I'm part of this tribe. I'm not an outcast, right? That's deep within us. We need to fit in, to some degree. And so we have to know these things that drive us, like in the depths of who we are, and take the judgment. I was like very hard on myself in the beginning and judged myself for everything, all the things that made me weak, all the things that made me, choose what I was choosing and stay where I was staying and not move. And then I got to the point where grace and the truth is you did the best you could with what you had. And then it's up to you to, when you know better, you just do better. And then you do better. And then I quit looking for good, bad, right, wrong, because that's another trap for people, because we want to be good and we want to be right at all costs, right? And so that's when it starts fragmenting the mind, and people start getting really confused. Like, I don't even know who the fuck I am. I don't really even know what I believe in. How the hell am I going to know what I want and my motives behind why I'm choosing what I'm choosing, or choosing to not change? And so it's really just, giving yourself that grace of like, we're humans and we're learning and we're doing the best we can, but there's some level that you have to know that you're going to be uncomfortable. And that's true. And at all costs, look for truth. Quit looking for this good, bad, right, wrong, and then judging yourself because you weren't right, or you could have been better. And so it's really this grace of just like what it is to be a human, and a human learning, and a human evolving. And then that massive responsibility and like self-reliance doesn't mean you look at yourself and just condemn everything that you do. If anything, it's this beautiful, unconditional, like, holy hell, we were trying hard. Now I see my motives. Now I understand my values. Now I understand what I care for and what I was seeking out through those things by keeping those things. And now I want to go towards those things in a healthier way, in a stronger way, in a more self-realized way. And so there's no failure at this. It's just this, I realize I'm doing this. I realize that some part of me is continuing to choose the smallness and loving the excuses that are letting me stay here. And that I'm a little bit afraid of, being free. Like, to even admit some of these things, like, is massively powerful and can propel you in the direction of what you actually want.
Yeah.
Fucking incredible.
Yeah. It's like we have these benchmarks, but even why do we have benchmarks, right? Why is there imposed limitations or imposed steps? Why can't we be open to all of it? Why is there a level to any of this at all, right? Like, why is that there?
Yeah. And can you imagine if we didn't have that? Like, and I think a lot of this goes back to, we're just trained to compare. Like, we're not trained to step in and just be something. We're trained to like perform and compare, and then perform and compare, instead of just being like, this is who I am. This is how I do things. This is how I speak. And I think it's that comparison, because can you imagine an education system that didn't have comparison and discipline and all of that the way that they do it? Because a part of all of that is good kids do this, bad kids do this. And so we're like, this is part of our neurological programming from the get-go. So even in people's, pursuit of becoming, self-reliant, and to realize all of these things that we're talking about, to actually live them, you're going to have to go head to head with that tendency for us to be like, okay, well, I should do it and look like that. Like, it should look like this, because this is also the trap that I see people fall into with regards to health and healing, that healing should look like that. Like, no, it doesn't. Healing's going to look however the fuck your body decides to heal you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how it should look. It's not going to look like somebody else. So even in this world of like, okay, how did somebody else with the same word do it? And how long did it take? And you can't compare. And we value that when we're talking about being an individual and so brilliantly unique. But then we jump into this other world of like, no, comparison over here is very important. And we've got to get to a point where we don't even look outside. Like, I tell this story all the time about this like master, because it's just so powerful to me. But it was like, he was invited to this like black tie affair, this really extravagant party. And he was just this ascended master or guru or whatever. I never get it right, but still. And so he shows up at this party, and this professor was telling his class this, and asked what this guru or this ascended master's response to showing up in rags at this like extravagant get together, where all these people were wearing like jewels and like the finest garments and everything. And everyone was just like, you know, he's humble, or he, you know, just complimented them or whatever. And, you know, the professor was like, actually, you're all wrong. Like, he didn't even notice. He didn't even notice. And like, that's what I think, if we could be individuals, if we could fall in love with being an individual and what that truly means, I think it would mean that we just show up as big as we could. Yeah. And we wouldn't even notice if it was weird. We wouldn't even notice if we weren't dressed right. We wouldn't even notice, because that comparison wouldn't even be valuable to us. And, you know, when you think about even the microbiome, we value diversity. And you're like, you don't want intestines to have overgrowth of just one thing. But society, we need you all to look the same, act the same, talk the same, heal the same, pee the same, poop the same. And I'm like, I've never seen two individuals the same. And so like, we really got to look at all of these things and just ask little simple questions. Like, why is a healthy gut one that has diversity? And a healthy world wouldn't be the same if we were all exactly who we are. Like, our heartbeats are just as unique and rare as our thumbprint. It will never be heard on this planet again, ever. And for us to be like looking to somebody else to look the same, act the same, speak the same, it's like saying that we're all individuals. But, you know, I liken it to like listening to, you know, say you listen to an album over and over again, you know all the lyrics, you know, by memory. You could just like write them out, and you're trying to go into the world and just act like you're an individual by just removing the lyrics and it just being an instrumental. Well, you're still, you know, all the words, and they're still going on in your head. And so that's where I think we really like have to, like with urgency, have to wash out. And like, that's been my new practice now. If I want to know what are my words without a book, without educate, like what is me that hasn't been touched by all of this? And like, if every individual, we're all medicine for each other, for this planet, but we're not medicine when we're carbon copies of something that we saw before us. We're only medicine if we're truly who we are in our fullest capacity, our highest expression. And like, that's a world that like, that's where we should go. And everyone's like, well, we need to ascend, we need to achieve. No, we need to wash out and like really uncover what it is to be an individual. And there would be no looking to another to compare what you are, because it's not comparable. And like, to me, that's the hardest work we have. But I think it would be the most beautiful and the most freeing. And like, I just feel like all the textbooks would just rot somewhere, and we'd be like, we don't care anymore. We want to go to the uncharted land. We want a new frontier. We've never been there before. Because the coolest thing I've seen with my patients that heal and heal quickly is they come to me and they literally, none of them know each other, but they have all said this one phrase, and they come and they look at me like, just like innocently, and they're like, now what? And I'm like, fucking exactly. Yeah. Now what? Why? Because your supplements don't matter. They don't hold weight. That diet doesn't matter because you don't need it. You don't like, it's all, you're on Mars. You don't even know what to do, because that anchoring point of always taking care of your health, always acting to be, you're free. And it terrifies people, because they're literally like, I don't even know what to do. I don't know what I value. I don't know what I care about. And I'm like, this is where I want everyone to be, because this would be what? Responding to reality as it is. Mm-hmm. Because you don't have all those conditions. You're not carrying all that weight. You're not having to choose every action to be or do or achieve. You're just like there, you know, on the edge of life, just doing life. And we should, if we were true, we would just show up and be like, so now what? I don't know. I've never been here before. And it's true, because if you think you've been here before, you're lying to yourself. If you think that yesterday's apple tastes like today's apple, you're not really here. you will never have that apple again. It's literally impossible. But we take so many things for granted, and we think that, you know, just so much with our minds that I just I wish we could do like that Men in Black little pin and just go blink and be like, human, just human the fuck out of this thing and see what this world would look like.
Speaking our language.
Okay.
You're just speaking our language, and we talk about who you're meant to be, who you are, getting out of the compare and contrast game. It's such a big theme of our work and even this podcast. So I love it.
Oh yeah, I had goosebumps head to toe. That entire monologue, I was lighting up. My entire body was like just fucking yeah, you know.
It's that whole body truth, right? It's like even when those patients said that, like I get goosebumps because I'm just like, I couldn't have said it better. And they're like, what? And I'm like, that's it. Like, that's literally it. And like throw in what we talked about earlier, like, how would you not live in a state of wonder like that? There would be no other way. That's the truest way, because you're just like, I've never seen this before. I've never seen this before. I've never seen, like, what in the hell is that? Like, this is cool. And like the other thing that I've, when I work with patients, like I have to work neurologically with getting them out of just a life autopilot. And it is the hardest thing that we have to do, because that's just where people are. And like, that's that world without the wonder. That's the world of, oh, I've driven down this road every single day. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Let's get into that on the flip side of this podcast for our members. This has been just an incredible first half. Guys, thank you so much for listening. This is Dr. Cassie Huckabee. Just me speaking for myself as an individual. I can already say this is one of the most empowering conversations I've ever been a part of personally. I'm really excited.
And this conversation will never happen again.
Yeah, that's right.
Ever. It couldn't. And it couldn't happen in any other time or any other combination.
No. That's what I love. That's what I love, is to have that understanding in every moment. You know, you're with 4 friends. It will never look like this ever again. The 4 of us, these souls will never be gathered like this in this moment ever again. Like that's presence. That's a presence that you can't, that's just, it's a beautiful thing. Anyways, we'll continue on the other side.
Love it.
Guys, we're going to put all Cassie's details in the show notes here. Be sure to check her out. Stay in touch on Instagram. Check her website out. And to our members, we'll see you on the other side. All right, to our members, welcome to the second half of this incredible conversation with Dr. Cassie Huckabee. Cassie, just before we ended there, we started talking about the stagnancy that people find themselves experiencing, the mundane, the routine. And like, obviously in that state of repetition, it is difficult for people to see what's on the other side. What's your message in that regard? I mean, obviously the malignant culture we live in plays a big part in that. What's your perception around all of that?
Yeah, it's part of the culture, but it's also, I always give the power back to the individual. You have to want to see what's available. Even the brain, I talk about it a lot too, the reticular activating system, like where you ask, what you ask of it, it finds more of. So if you say you want to see a lot of pink, it's going to find everything in your surroundings, in your environment that is pink. And so we can't blame something on society. We can't blame something on culture when we are doing it every single day in our own little reality. And so when you know that you're doing this, you know, what I have, you know, my patients do is just like observe what they're looking for, observe what they're asking for more of. And most of us are not asking for the beautiful, the wonderful, the miraculous. And then they have one day of complete presence and they're like, oh my gosh, my world is magic. I'm like, it always has been. But you were looking, you were distracted by the news, you were distracted, but what is even watching the news? You chose to go watch it. Yeah. You chose to scroll through Instagram and feed on certain things. You have complete control over everything. And even just like if you take Instagram, Instagram works the same as that part of your brain. If you're following certain things, if you're reading and engaging with certain things, what does it do? It gives you more of that same shit. Yeah. So if you want something better, we've got to go ask for something better. And so even just with our, you know, perception, our existence, we're doing this on the individual level. And so to take ownership as an individual to change what you're looking for in your world, in your body, in society, it has to change everything. And it's not that it's not here the whole time. It always is. But if you're not looking for it, it's not going to show up.
From your perspective, like why is everything that we seem to experience from the culture so geared towards these collectivist ideologies? Like, what is it that the individual is potentially creating for us to constantly get this feedback of, you mean, this collectivism? You guys are all the same. We all have to fit in the same box. Where are we responsible for what we're getting back on that regard? You know,
I think we're massively responsible. Again, I always think on the individual level. I always put it back on me, like what I see in society that I want changed. Am I doing it to the people around me? Or am I doing it to myself before I go and look at them as they need to change something? Because they're usually just a reflection of what we're asking for, what we're perpetuating. And so a lot of it is the conformity we are doing, we're self-imposing that. And so even everything that we do is, we're really, again, we'll go back to that, in being an individual, we do not feel safe being individuals. We do not value being an individual. We feel more comfortable in misery and the known and, you know, the whole world that we don't like, that we stay in it. And so we perpetuate the exact same things that we're saying we want to fight. Like, we'll talk about it, but we're not doing it, because what would be required to get outside of that, to get outside of conformity, to get outside of everybody being carbon copies of each other, you have to risk the danger of being an individual, being an outcast, being like, you actually have to go head to head with all of these things. And they're no longer just stories. They're no longer just conversation pieces. And it's hard to do, because the other thing too that I talk to people about all the time is it requires you to be true. And so to be true, you go up against a lot, and you go up against losing a lot too. And we, again, don't like to be in reality. We like to have schedules and plans and this make-believe world that every single day is exactly the same. Why? Because most of us are afraid of the reality that if we sat here, even in this moment, and actually admitted the fact that none of us know if we even get like the next 30 minutes, if we were being really freaking honest. But it's a very comfortable story. And so we like to keep those stories. We like to keep that comfort. And so we'll lie to ourselves every single day. And we'll say we want these things. We say we want to be, you know, mindful in the present moment. We want to be individuals. But again, it goes back to, we're not choosing that. Yeah. And we're not choosing it on purpose, from my perspective and just what I've seen with working with people. And, you know, I do all the work too. So I never say people are doing all this and I'm so different. It's that I had to look inside me, even in my own healing journey, and see where I was the biggest problem, and everything that I was looking to society and being like, oh, it should change. It should be different. And be like, well, how do you treat you? Yeah. And then how do you treat those closest to you? And then how do you treat your community? And when you start looking at that level, it's like, man, we've got a lot of work to do just with the person in the mirror before we even get to our communities.
Oh yeah. It's such a stark thing when you get to that precipice and you sit there and you're like, I am the common denominator in every problem I've ever experienced. You know, and then when you decide to step into that fire, like it's a very difficult step to take, right? And for the longest time, we're completely reluctant and we refuse to hold ourselves accountable when we've spent our whole lives perpetuating this inauthenticity, right? Whether it's little white lies, whether it's, you mean, any kind of action we make against our true morals and our true values. And then all of a sudden we're faced with the decision where, okay, I can make a choice here. I can step into authenticity. I can begin to own all the places where I've been perpetuating this cycle and I clearly don't like my life. I'm clearly not happy. But am I going to die? Am I going to allow that death to occur or not? You know, and this is the primary dilemma. And most people are just avoiding this shadow. And but no one can avoid it forever, right? No. Just eventually, when it finds you, the deeper and darker the abyss is that you're going to find yourself in. Yeah.
Well, what you just said there is exactly what I found in my own journey was you have to let the character of who you thought you were, you have to let that character die. Because what we are typically doing as individuals is we are living out characters that were written and like approved of, like we got constant feedback by our friends, our parents, our teachers, and you got feedback on what was acceptable, what was good, what people liked, and then you create a character based on all of that input. And so none of it was you being like, do I like me? Do I even like this shit that I'm wearing? Do I like putting my hair this way? Do I even give a flying fuck about any of this stuff? And so what happens is most people are living these counterfeit lives, and they're wanting nourishment from it. And so I tell them all the time, well, you're performing and it's exhausting and there's no nourishment there. So it's like being on stage eating plastic fruit so that it all looks perfect and like wondering why you're starving. And this is what we do as individuals. Like we are so far, like I always say, your life is your medicine, but you've got to make sure it's yours. And most people don't have any fucking idea what is theirs. And like that to me is the saddest thing. And so that death does have to occur, and it's a death to that character, to this was who, you know, I'll just use me for example. This is who Cassie is. She's a doctor. She's a this, she achieved, she was an athlete. And then to actually admit like that's actually has nothing to do with actually who I really am.
Yeah.
And when you step outside of that character, you have to risk being rejected by those that were in relationship to that character, as that character was. Because most of the time we have stories about people, they have stories about us, and then our stories are in relationship. And most everything humans do is based on relationship, avoiding, you know, being an outcast, wanting to be loved. And so this ties into everything again, is it's usually a story. And we are giving our life, we are giving our vitality, we're giving everything that we have, our entire capacity, to just holding up these characters that weren't written by us. Yeah. And we're so stuck in the performance of it. And, you know, it's not a life that nourishes anybody. And so even the people that are performing the best, I think that was one of the biggest eye-opening things working with people, because I have the privilege to see people unfiltered because they're desperate. They've tried everything, and what's on the line, their actual life. Yeah. And so then I get to see humans as humans are. And so what you see is that their characters are killing them, and they're killing themselves to uphold a character and to try to pull their hands off of that character, like, is the most terrifying thing you can ask them to do, but it's the one thing that would save their life. And so it's this hard thing with being a human, because we've been trained to build and create those characters. And when you tell somebody like none of that is any of that you, and they're sitting there like, no, I have all of this money, I have all of these things, I have, you know, this fame, I have everything that you could think that you want, and I'm empty and I'm sad and I'm, you know, I don't even want to be here. And so that's usually the exact phrase coming from somebody that's just been a performance. Like, I've been a doll for society. I had a conversation with a woman this week, actually, and she was in music, and she realized, kind of connected the two, that just like when she was a performer in, I think it was the orchestra or something, that she was just a vehicle for a song not written by her. Yeah. And she like connected those dots, and she was like, my whole life, I've just been the performer of a piece that wasn't written by me, and I want to now compose my own song. But you got to break up with that whole other world, and that takes massive, massive amounts of courage. Why? Because everything that you think that you know, everything that you think that you love, everything that you think that you have, kind of just sits up there up for grabs, being like, actually, I don't know if any of this is real. And it could be the most heartbreaking thing to come face to face with the truth of it. But from what I found, like, it is heartbreaking. and you're going to be uncomfortable no matter what, but to be uncomfortable towards truth is always the best option. And it liberates people, and then they get into a life that actually nourishes them, that heals them, that doesn't look the way you would think that it should look. You don't sound, smell, act, appear how you thought that that character would be, to be loved, and to be loved as you really are. Like, we do what we do because we want love. And the number one thing we want is that unconditional love. And, but unfortunately, even again, with ourselves in the mirror, we don't love without condition ever. Like, I've hardly met any person that truly has the capacity to love without condition, to ourselves first. Because if you can't give it to yourself, you sure as hell can't give it to somebody else. Like, your first relationship is here. And so this is one thing that we have to understand, that your character is built because you were seeking love. And the story I kind of try to give my patients so that they understand is, it would be like, you know, say you're in love with this guy, and we'll do it for the ladies for right now. You guys can flip it. So you're in love with this guy, and he finally like texts you and says he's going to go out on a date with you. And you're like, fuck yes. Oh my gosh. And he's like, but I'm going to send a package, and everything in the package I need you to put on. And you're like, okay, I love this guy. Like, I literally think I love this guy, and I'm so excited, and you're pumped, and it's going to be this big thing. And a package shows up, and it's like a costume, and you're just like, okay, it's odd, like a black wig, these fake boobs, butt implants, this little tiny little thing, heels, this whole like face thing. And you're like, okay, I guess it is Halloween, so like, this is cool. Like, I would never pick this out, but whatever. And then he shows up and opens the door, and he's just in a tux and looks like a normal human being. He's like, you're beautiful, I love you. Like, would you, as a woman sitting there wearing all of that, when reality hits that, like, oh, I had to be wearing all of, okay, would that love sink in? Absolutely fucking not. You'd probably resent him on the spot if you had anything about you.
Oh yeah.
And then there's another scenario that, like, say you had a really close friend and you really cared about him, and you were having a really bad day, and you're like in your underwear and t-shirt and haven't showered in 3 days, and your home's a disaster. And he's like, hey, I've got something for you. I'm just going to stop by real quick. And you don't even have time to like put pants on. You're like, oh, okay. And he shows up, and he's just like stunned, sitting there holding like a gift for you and being like, you're so beautiful. Like, I just want you to know I love you. Like, what we do to ourselves is that first version. And what we want is the second. And we can't even give it to ourselves. And so the relationship you have with yourself is often what you give to everybody outside it. Like, you treat you like you treat everybody else.
Yeah.
And so that unconditional love that we're wanting, we keep that story together, usually not for other people, really. Usually because we, like, when we sit with ourselves at home, when this isn't fixed, and this isn't taken care of, and this isn't on, and like, we sit there and like, you, good luck out there, because I don't see anything worthwhile. And so that's that conversation that I think we need to heal. And if we healed that conversation, if we healed that level of love, of like, no, I'll take the disaster. She's fucking rad. Have a conversation with her. She'll tell you something. And I'm going to quit making her perform. I'm going to quit making her a doll.
Yeah.
Because again, that's us choosing.
Yeah.
And so that unconditional love is why we, you know, again, we have to understand why we do what we do. It's not because we're psychotic. It's that we really, really want those things. We really, really care. And we really, really want to be seen and loved and accepted for who we are. But we're so fucking terrified, again, of showing who we really are, because we know for certain we would be rejected. Why? Because we reject ourselves every single second of every single day when we are not performing.
Yeah.
And so it's in those moments we've got to go recapture. It's in those moments that we've got to go remember, literally, something of value. Because if we don't do that, it's just a bunch of characters acting with a bunch of other characters, and this story having a relationship with that story, having a relationship with that story. And like, you know, we're not going to get anywhere, and good luck trying to get to the level of society. Yeah. And so I always take it to the individual and go to like the sweetness of what we want. And like, can you give that to yourself first with no conditions? Like, the world of becoming has stripped people of life. that once you become this, you'll be successful. Why do we care about success? Those people are probably loved, right? And so we've just got to really make things simple as humans, and go to like the heart of these things, and go just breathe life back into ourselves, so that then when we show up, we're true. And when truth has a relationship with truth, and there can't be any judgment, because we're like, if you can hold me who I am, I'm going to hold you how you are. Judgment again, comparison again, has no place here. It just doesn't fit. And so just these little things, it's like, oh yeah, let's talk about love. No, let's talk about love. I work with people all the time, and I guarantee the one thing that has 100% of the people, no matter who they are, their names, how famous they are, 100% of the people is that right there. And so it factors into our health, it factors into our relationship, because your life is your medicine, and how you perceive your life and how you live your life is the medicine, right? And so many people are literally medicating a life that's not nourishing, medicating a life that's actually depleting them of life. And so when you really understand the magnitude of this, the magnitude of how it's not just a cute thing to seek and be truth and let that character die. It's a matter of like life and death for you. And like your life is your medicine. And if you're just a performance and act, you're going to get to a point where things get really empty. So just like, you said, it will come. But you can go ahead and meet it head on and say, you know what? I want that part to die. Because like even me, when I let her die, it was heartbreaking. You grieve. You're like, gosh, like my relationships changed. The dynamics with my family changed. Everything that I thought I valued, like I worked my ass off for so many years. I missed out on so much life to have this title. And then again, it's like, I don't give a fuck about it at all. And like that had to all go. And so when we do that, like it breaks your heart. And you have to know that like there's a beauty to it, but you're going to hurt too, because you invested so much in it. To know that it was all like the biggest lie, and you were the one lying to yourself every single day, every single moment, like that's heartbreaking to admit it. But then when you can be there and hold that and be like, you know what, we're never doing that again. And whoever the fuck you are, we're going to be that every single day. And if you change tomorrow, you change tomorrow. But whoever you are today, we're going to be the biggest version of it. And to give yourself those micro freedoms to be whoever the hell you are. And if you love pink today and you hate pink tomorrow, fantastic. Right. Yeah. And so, I love that you went there, because it's the core of, what I even have to do. I feel like if people love themselves, and if people were true, like true as true could be, I even question sometimes if we would even have dis-ease, because when I look at the body, it's disharmony, dysfunction, dis-ease, literally. And what is more dysfunctional and disharmonious than you not being congruent with that which you are? Yes. I can't think of anything greater.
Oh, absolutely. This is the primary underlying, I guess, issue. Yeah. I had a conversation the other day with a woman, and she goes to me, is it possible without pain? Is it possible without upheaval?
I wish, right?
Yeah.
But I think
we're so geared towards avoiding pain.
Yeah. No, and I think like we avoid pain and we avoid failure. And I think when you fall in love with being like, no, if you even just think generally, like when you put anesthesia on the skin or something to numb so you don't feel pain, what do you also lose the capacity to do? Like you can't even feel gentle touch. You couldn't even feel a kiss. And so that's the world we're in, is everybody wants to be anesthetized, and they think that it's just so they never have to feel that pain. But what I have found with people is that leads to the, complete inability to feel the opposite. And when you come to terms with the contrast of that is the beauty of being a human. It's like you wouldn't have, you know, if all we were is just bliss, and I'm sure that's what we go to at some point, like, there would not be much that you needed to do or communicate or anything. And so to know that pain is part of being a human, and a lot of times the pain isn't saying that like something's bad, it's saying you're going towards something that's really good.
That's right.
And to change your mindset on those things and say, you know, at all costs, I just want to feel like, I don't want to be numb to this life. I'm going to let life, you know, bring me to my knees and know that I can stand up and know that I want, you know, that dynamic nature of being a human. Because so, you know, anything else in the human body, if you see this, you got a fucking problem. And so like, why do we want that to be the limits of our experience? Like just hurt just a little and then just be a little happy, and then we're going to just like function right in here, simplified. And no, we want to be, you know, dynamic and know that you have the capacity to endure that. Like strength is not avoiding pain. Strength is not feeling pain. Like that's the exact opposite. Strength is being like, I can endure this and I'm going to level the fuck up after it. And I know that I will. And I can sit here and I'm not going to rush my body through it. I'm not going to rush my mind or my heart through it. I'm going to sit here with it, feel it all. I'm not going to bring in anything to take it away. And I'm going to learn what's here to learn, because there's so much brilliance in pain. Pain is such a communicator, especially with the physical body. Like I'm always really, really concerned when a person comes to me and they can't feel any pain. That's more concerning than somebody that's in chronic pain. And people are like, that doesn't make any sense. No, if you can't feel, we've got a lot of problems. And so feeling and the intensity of feeling is never an issue. You know, we've got to change your perspective of it. We've got to calibrate the system and lots of different things, but to not feel is so much more alarming. And I think, unfortunately, that's what's sold to us as something valuable. The whole world, you know, antidepressants wouldn't exist. A lot of things wouldn't exist if we didn't think that there was some virtue in not feeling pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we're spoiled in Southern California, but I don't think we appreciate the sun as much if there weren't rainy days.
Right. I know. It's so true. Yeah, goodness. But it's hard. It's hard to admit that. And even like life, I think it's very confusing for people because they feel like it's mostly pain. And to know that you can shift that, but you've got to consciously go after it. You can't just sit there. You've got to go pursue that which you want to experience, and you've got to go saturate yourself in that. And you know, the inputs are all there. Like even this morning, there's just morning light coming through palm leaves, and I'm sitting there just like crying, like, how cool is this? Like, how cool is this? Like to see things, to feel things. And so often we have to, you know, wait until you don't have a function to be grateful that you had it. Like I've done so many experiments on my body, and one of the most ridiculous ones, I actually accidentally burnt my corneas with UV light. It was a bulb, not sunlight. And I just like the 4 days after that, the pain and not being able to see and just being like, oh my gosh, like I forget how cool it is to not be able to feel your corneas. Like, does anyone else have gratitude for that or no? Like you, like we have to wait until we lose something to value it, instead of just being like, how cool is it to feel pain, to cry sometimes, and like how amazing is this life that like something can make you cry. Like we like movies that stimulate feeling, but we only like to go and feel when we can tell ourselves that it's not real. So we want to go into a controlled setting to feel intense emotions. We'll go to horror films, we'll go to romantic comedies, we'll go to tragedies, because we want to feel intensity, but we don't want to feel it in real life. We want to feel safe to feel. And if we could just like, you know, get rid of all the movies, you're living the greatest movie there ever was. And like the emotions available here are like off the charts. Some of them don't even have names, but you got to be here with them. You can't be like, I really don't want to hurt, so I'm not going to go out there and enjoy and feel what's available here.
Wow.
I mean, just that conversation stimulated emotion in me, you know. It's just a beautiful thing to get to that level of gratitude and appreciation of the moments. I mean, to just notice the sun coming through your window and for that awesomeness to bring you to tears is pretty magical and amazing. And you know, I think for each individual, it's really important. This is where you go back to doing individual inner work is, well, what is the thing that you turn to when these things come up? Some people don't even know that the thing is happening inside of themselves. And then they turn to the thing, the drug, the porn, the whatever, to not feel the thing. They don't even know that they're feeling because it's so automatic, you know, and it just, I mean, that's the work right there.
Yeah,
you know, to be able to sit with yourself, like, oh my God, I'm going to sit and just bawl and allow myself to bawl. And how to like, oh, I gotta get a tissue now. I gotta wipe the tears off. No one can see me crying.
Yeah.
You know, I just happen to have a tissue here.
I was like, you've got props. Like, this is impressive. No, it's so true. And even like people have shrunk their capacity to feel the intensity of things that happen. And I remember even like growing up, I valued being tough. You know, I grew up on a farm, like saw the men be tough, even the women were tough, like tough. It was very, you know, virtuous to be tough and to not really show emotion. And then I remembered I had a boyfriend in college get in a motorcycle accident. And it was something, you know, just that my mind, I didn't even know what to do. Like, I just like had no words. And I remember just being so like stunned there and people just being like, me in the, you know, waiting room, and everyone's just like, are you okay? And I was just like, I think I like, don't even know how to have an emotion right now. Like, I don't even know how to produce crying. And then when I, you know, go through med school and learn about what happens even in our tears, like we lose stress, or not lose, we, you know, eliminate stress hormones even in our tears. And so the body has these beautiful things to process being a human, and it has to be strong to process these big emotions. And, you know, when I look back, I'm like, gosh, if I could have let her cry and just been like, you should be a disaster right now. Be a disaster. It's very appropriate. And nothing about being strong right now is doing anything for anyone. And you have nothing to prove to people. And if we could do this in real life, of like, it doesn't have to make sense to them. It doesn't have to be appropriate to them. But if you feel it to the magnitude that it is, because I guarantee that there's medicine in the expression of that, just like your tears can help with the stress response. It's such a beautiful thing. And even like, you know, in the book, The Anatomy of an Illness, like he cured himself through laughing. Like, these things are such beautiful expressions of being a human. And, you know, the other thing that just blew my mind when I was looking at healing and radical remissions and people that healed stuff that were told they couldn't heal. The one case that I came across that completely blew my mind was spontaneous healing of cancer through an extreme bout of anger. Not gratitude, not joy, anger. And I was like, what the fuck? How? Because it's true. And only humans with our intellect are dumb enough to say, these are good, these are bad. Don't feel these, feel these. If you feel these, you're bad. And the body's like, this, I'm communicating with you. Listen to me. And just let things be as they are. And again, we would have healthy people if we responded appropriately to the input that came in, instead of being like, oh, should I not cry? I should be tough right now for all of you because I'm tough. I'm really tough. So I'm going to act like this doesn't hurt, instead of just being like, this freaking hurts. Or like just being honest. Because even like, again, we'll go to relationship. Can you imagine what it would be like to be in a relationship with somebody that was like, I'm getting really triggered right now because I'm so jealous because I love the fuck out of you and I'm just feeling jealousy really hard right now. And then being like, oh my gosh, don't feel that way. Like, I get it. And like, can you imagine if we could even be honest enough to communicate this with those closest to us? But no, we're just like, oh no, I'm fine. It's cool. It's fine. It's fine. And then there's dysfunction, there's disharmony, and we just perpetuate all of these things. We're like, why are we sicker than we've ever been? Oh, because we're smarter and tougher than we've ever been. Right? And less human than we've ever been. Like, if we could be human, the body knows how to calibrate. The body knows how to heal. The body knows when to express, how to express the extent that needs to be expressed. And even in the expression, there's healing. And so, you know, this is a massive conversation, but I love that you brought it up because it's so powerful.
Yeah, I think I already know the answer you're going to give, but I want to hear it in your words. Like, obviously, we talk about the unconscious and repressed trauma and repressed emotions in your work and the people you work with. Like the nature of the unconscious is that it is unconscious. So how do you find that comes up, and how do you find people can move through that?
Yeah, so I've never met an individual that hasn't been touched to some degree by a trauma. And so again, you know, I acknowledge those with all of my patients, but again, I put the individual back in the driver's seat. And what I came to learn, even with my story and a lot of things that happened in my life, when I let my past shape my future, my experience of my present was very different. And then when I let my present shape my past, I became so much more powerful. And I was like, that's a very interesting way to look at it, because so many people are like, that happened to me, therefore I am the way I am. And again, I'm always going to give power back to the individual and be like, well, other people have experienced similar things too. And why did they turn it into, you know, they alchemized it into something as their most pivotal moment in life that propelled them to something greater than they could have ever been. And so then I look at this again and like, I will never minimize trauma. It's held in the body. It's a big piece to our psychology, to our neurological programming. But again, there's something so much greater. And our present perception, our present state, our present goals can dictate the impact of those traumas. And our power is right here. So if you, again, are using, you know, and I don't say this lightly, but if you're using a trauma as an excuse, there's a more beautiful opportunity for you that's available by being like, I couldn't change that, but I can change the story that I'm writing and living out because of that. And like when I work with people, I found that, you know, talking about these things doesn't help them. And so my thing is always like, so what are we going to do about it? How do we move forward? How do we not let this steal not one more breath of life in you? Yeah. Because sometimes we look at those traumas and like, how long did the actual traumatic event take place? Like how long? And they're like, you know, even I'll just use me as an example, like an hour, you know, one was like a couple of months. The accident was a year or two. Yeah. How many years has it stolen after it ended? So many more. And so we really got to go there and be like, gosh, again, me to me. We couldn't change what happened to us, but we sure as hell can change what we wrote into our psyche, what we wrote into our physiology, what we write into ourselves every single day, and what we perpetuate moving forward. And there's so many things when I look back, it's like, I will not carry you any longer. I'm not going to carry you to my tomorrow, and I sure as hell am not going to carry you to my next year if I get another year. And so this, again, I think is that massive self-reliance, massive truth to be able to like sit there and acknowledge these things and be like, no, like that was terrible. And you don't minimize these things, but you can go back and be like, this woman today who has lived through all of that, who has this new understanding, this new appreciation for what it is to be alive and to be a human, she can look back and go extract the wisdom from it and the power from it, and then move forward with that. And that's what I feel like we have available, even in this world of trauma, because anytime I see something that is not letting people level up, I always kind of want to, you know, go and rework it, look at it again and be like, we're still the ones writing the story about how we experienced that. Could we rewrite a different story? Not say, oh, it didn't happen, because it did. But can we rewrite the meaning, the value, and the programs we put into place because of how we experienced that input? And so that's where I go with that in a very, you know, gentle and gracious way, of course, because you cannot minimize those things as human beings. They're very real. They're, you know, our bodies hold all of that. It was there for the whole thing, even if we've forgotten most of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Erasmus was sensing a bit of a trigger or an emotional response from you during that. What were you kind of feeling or experiencing? Was there anything there?
No, I mean, just the beauty of that reminder and the knowing that, like, you know, yeah, things happened to us in the past, and whether or not we're going to keep that as part of our story, or not, you know. And so yeah, I think there's no coincidences. Also, why you're here right now and we're having this podcast, especially for things that are going on in my life. And so this is where I bow down to the awesomeness of the universe, of that whatever intelligence, you know, and it's pretty special. So I feel really grateful.
Beautiful. I call those cosmic winks, and I feel like they always happen in those moments where you need that little, we're all strong, but sometimes we need that little, you know, burst of oxygen or a little bit of hydration, and how these things just come together, just like how a book will end up in your life, or like just something beautiful, a song you've never heard before, or and I think this is the world we live in. And you know, the co-creation of moments, every single moment we're co-creating with even people we don't know their names, and how the medicine that can come out of, you know, even a conversation, a gathering of, you know, in totally different places. It's beautiful.
I think it's incredible. And it's like, I think when you're on that path of truth, like when you are an individual that is here for the truth, those cosmic moments, those cosmic winks happen. Well, I think they're always happening, but you're able to see them and notice more. And so I think that's, I can only think about my life and how many times that's happened, and it's led me from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing that has brought me to who I am right now, having this conversation with both of you. And I'm grateful for all of it.
Yeah, me too. I say that all the time. Like, even parents sometimes are like, I wish you know, they want to take all these traumatic things away from their kids and make sure they never have them, and like do all this stuff. And I'm like, if anybody ever came to me and took away all that I had to survive through, I would say, don't you dare. Like, don't you dare touch it. Why? I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be sitting here in this moment with y'all. I wouldn't get to work with the people I get to work with. I wouldn't have the understanding or the capacity to see the world through these eyes that I didn't have before. And so to, you know, if you're listening and you're on a journey too, and this is a hard time, know that there will be a time that you look back and be like, don't you dare touch that. You leave that exactly where it's at, because the human that came out of that experience is nothing like the human that came in. And I talk about change all the time. That's change, right? And it's not that we run away from those, you know, opportunities, but that we know that we're strong enough to go through it. And every single day you just take a step, and that's all that's required. And so it's a beautiful thing to admit it, to look back and be like, no, even this one, I would never do it again. But even that one, don't touch, leave it alone. Yeah.
I've got a question for you. What are your thoughts on plain water?
I like herbal teas and fruits. What are y'all's thoughts?
I mean, I actually like herbal teas and fruits too. I never really was a huge like plain water drinker, but I definitely drank it. But I was always the type of person that was like, wait, you're saying every single person on the planet needs to have 8 glasses of water every single day? Like, I'm just not into these absolute like statements that people make. But I'm curious, you know. But herbal teas and fruit, I'm all about it.
Yeah, we'll do a little blip on water. So water is a solvent. So when you think about introducing that to the human body, we need our electrolytes, our minerals, all of these beautiful compounds. And if you put a solvent in the body, it will pull these things. So there's more to this conversation about water. That's why I just like living things in my water. Because if you think about in nature, let's always go back to who does it perfectly. This would be coming, you know, off of rocks, off of cliffs and mountains and springs. It would be so alive, so vital, so electric, so full of minerals and nutrients. that I think we just got to go recapture our words, because what we call water is not water. And maybe that would clarify things for people. But no, I like to have living things in my water.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mhm.
I think this is a good place to.
Oh yeah,
to end
this
the
is
conversation.
All right.
Thank you.
This is a beautiful place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Yes. Thank y'all for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day.
No, you too.
Yeah.
Before we go, is there anything that you'd like to leave our audience with? Perhaps how they can find you or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'll leave them with that. And then one little thing that I always like to leave people with. So you can find me at Grit Natural Medicine. That's my practice. I have a lot of different options to work with me or communicate with me. Then I'm also on social media, not a lot, but I try to be present there at Dr. Cassie Huckabee. All of that's going to change soon, but for now, that's what it is. And the one thing that I always want to leave people with, because we never know if like this is our last moment, our last conversation, is for like you to always know that there's nothing outside of you that you need. And that if you ever come to a moment, you have all that you need. And it is with you at all times. There's nothing ever that anyone's going to put in your body that's going to make you anything better. And it really is just realizing it. It sounds so simple. It sounds so, sparkly or whatever, but I cannot stress it enough that it couldn't be more true to go within and know what you have, know the gold that you're sitting on already. And sometimes the best things we could do is just to wash everything out, because we're the most powerful things on the planet. You're more healed now than you were when you started listening to this thing, and that's a provable fact. And so just fall in love with that truth, fall in love with being a human, and take the nourishment out of every single moment that you get.
You're amazing. And it's so incredibly inspiring. Thank you for being you. Thank you for walking the path that you have walked and you're still walking. And
yes,
whatever it is that you continue to unfold to and become. Guys, thanks for listening to Here for the Truth with Dr. Cassie Huckabee. We'll see you next time.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean.